Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, Space Cadets. It is really great to have you here on another Devlog. It's so exciting. It is Cosmic Cavalier, and we are building a space adventure game loosely inspired by the classic Atari ST game, Sundog. If you look at the first video in the series, I talk about that. This is the last video of the year. Goodbye 2021, you won't be missed. And today I want to do something weird. I want to get under the hood and show you how the game works. We're going to peer behind the curtain today. So let's take a look and find out what the core concept of the game is. And I'm going to talk about maybe a little bit of the flow of development too. For those of you who are into being an amateur game dev, this will be definitely interesting for you. For those of you who are just like, hey, how's that video game coming and when's it going to be available? This will be less of interest to you because we're going to look more under the skin. I'm not going to get into deep coding or anything like that. That would not be a very interesting video. But let's start out with the core room that drives the whole game. That would be the piloting room. When you start the game, it's going to actually start you out inside your ship, and then you're going to come out and be able to do things around here. But the point being is that the room that you're in right now, and that's how Game Maker works in the concept of rooms, this room is the piloting room, and it's currently set to DAND system. Okay. The piloting room actually updates the entire solar system every time you come back from the map room. When you go to map room, it comes back and it triggers the whole thing again. But the entire game, as far as space portion of the game is concerned, is happening inside the piloting room. That includes the maintenance bay area, and it also includes the newly added cargo bay area. The reason I'm having that all happen here is to make my life a little bit easier, to tell you the truth. This stuff actually exists in the same room, in the same space during gameplay. The reason is that when you get attacked by an enemy ship, I want the control panel to be able to literally take damage right there. It is possible for me just to have computer code running in the background to say, you know, line 1, 2, 3, and just say line 1 is dead and everything else, and then recreate it. But I'm not smart enough to do that, and I don't want to think that hard. So what I'm going to do instead is that you have a physical object here in the game world that represents all that stuff. So when you get hit, when your hull takes a hit, I'm going to have a physical object run around here and have a chance of stopping on one of these objects and destroying it. So that during gameplay, the same maintenance bay that you're working in can take damage. That means if you're walking through your ship, if you're flying the ship, if you're doing whatever, I can have that take damage. So that's the reason I'm doing it that way. I did have it in a separate way, and I was trying to run code to say, well, let's just track a number for it and do more of a virtual concept of the number taking a hit, so the number goes to 0, if that makes sense to you. So instead of being lit and in good shape, the number just toggles to 0. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to actually throw a blasted object onto it. You a blasted object. And we throw it on there. Cool. So that's how that works. Anything else that I add in here is going to all happen within this room. The other thing that gets spawned into the room, I don't think I have no, I don't. The other thing that gets spawned into the room is going to be the jump ring, the gate. That gets spawned in by the sun. The sun controls a whole lot of what is going on out here in the galaxy, in the solar system. And the sun is also going to spawn in all of the planets, okay? So let's go grab the sun. Yeah, the sun is, when it gets started off, it's just going to have all of the planets that it could be pulling in here, okay? All the names of the planets, all of their orbits, and everything else is going to be here. The sun is going to know because of this control object called system command. It's going to know what its name is supposed to be, how far its orbit is going to be, all kinds of different stuff about it. Its sprite, all of this stuff is going to be pulled from the system command table. So when the sun gets spawned into the world and the room starts up, I wrote a note. It says a whole new world. I'm funny. A whole new world. It's a weird end of your episode already, isn't it? So yeah, there you go. When it starts up, the sun says, let's make a jump ring if there's not one. The jump ring is going to decide where it's going to be in the universe based on that database we were just looking at, the system command database, and we're going to start creating planets. Actually, it waits a second because I thought that was an easy way to make sure it doesn't double create planets. I said, okay, when it's created, just wait half a second and then make some more planets after half a beat here. And it's going to create all of the planets, and the planets are going to be, coming off of the database that you have here. This whole complicated table. This is called a array in GameMaker. It would be called an array in any other software you're using too, but this is a kind of a nested array, a multi-dimension array. It's basically an array inside of an array. That's not important unless you're into code. If you're into code, it's a multi-dimensional array. So that's the cool thing. Same exact concept, by the way, that happens with cargo. Cargo could be anything from this entire database, all right? And the whole database, it's a long database I wrote. To fill it out, it'll be the category of item, like category 7 is tools, and they're set to kind of a high cost range, mid to high cost range. So I'll have low cost, which would be starting at 50 credits here, all the way up to a terraformer, 1,400 credits. So if you're out here shopping, you'd be able to come across these different items. Some planets will deal in tools more, or in tech more, or in, contraband a bit more, and others won't do it. When the market is created, it will decide what it's actually going to deal in, okay? Customize on create. So when the market is created, it's going to decide whether it has a higher demand for a different category item off that same category, and it'll decide if it's going to increase or decrease the demand on it, and also whether they're going to sell that item. So I will modify this. So by default, this is just set for, we'll sell everything, and there is no supply or demand offset by default. But when I create it in the individual cities, they're going to go ahead and have their own unique version of it. Speaking of cities, that brings me into cities that I've been working on tirelessly. I'd say tirelessly, but I'm lying. I get tired of it. So in the cities, this is where you're going to spawn in those markets, which is the next thing for me to be working on. I've been fiddling around making sure that the city makes sense so that I have a real blueprint for it. And this is starting to make more sense now. So the city is starting to actually function. I've got it set for having its own backgrounds, its own foregrounds, the city command control, kind of an object that tells it how to parallax everything. This is where we're going to put in the trigger points the same way that I do on the ship. On the ship that lets you go to different areas. Same thing on the city. You'll trigger it and it'll just take you to a market. And the market currently exists in its own room, but that will actually spawn within the city itself. So instead of I've got it in a testing room right now, but this will actually spawn into the city. The market itself is actually really cool because, again, it's tables on tables on tables, all referring back to each other. The market is literally that one object right there. I'm giggling right now. You can see I'm smiling really big. I'm really proud of myself. The reason I'm really proud of myself is because when I get to a city, I'm going to be able to take the object, this market object, that's what I called it. Literally, it's called this market. And, edit all that table of values of whatever we're going to sell, what our supply and demand rates are to offset the sell and buy prices on everything, so you have a unique experience per planet. But all I have to do is drop in that object, and it will create everything. So when the room starts, it's going to just build out everything based on its own table of needs and supply and demand. So it makes my life easier in the long run. But that's the kind of stuff that takes a really blooming long time to try to code up. How to create everything, and when it creates all that, that's the market spawner, probably is what that is. Yeah. So it'll create all of that stuff and pull in the table in the database and create the button, the buy button. It'll create the background, just literally everything, and it will refer back to your cargo. It's just a lot. Boom, boom, boom. Last thing. Oh, let's talk about in the ship itself when you're piloting around. See, here's the cutaway view, but here's the actual ship. When you're piloting the ship around, it is also going to pull from a database. So the things that it's pulling brings me right back to the reason I was also wanting this to be live in the room, because these guys are actually calculating how much power they've got. So the end level right there is calculating up to say, okay, what does this equal? Pass that information back into the ship. All right. So if we've got our thrusters are maxed out to 10, it's going to pass that back to the ship, and the ship is going to say, cool, our thrusters are at 10. What's that mean? Well, it goes back to the main top-level game control object. When you start off, it's got all the ship specs for these global variables for your maximum speed, maneuvering shields, tactical, data range, what quest level you might be at, which is kind of a little bit more formative right now. It doesn't do a lot right now. How far you're allowed to jump within the map room is decided here. So the whole maintenance bay is telling the whole system to multiply out by these levels over here. So it's never going to go beyond anything. Beyond anything that is allowed to. So if your global hull is at 3, later on when you get it increased, global hull is going to be at 10. The damage you can take out of 10. So when you get it upgraded, it'll never go beyond that maximum level of 10. But in the meantime, it's multiplying against these numbers. So the maneuvering, for example, is set to 0.01 on your maneuvering. So after you start messing with that, table, with the patch cables and everything, and you start building out your own maintenance area, it's going to tweak those numbers. So by default, you might have that 0.1 for your maneuvering, but as you start to add to it, it says, cool, we're going to add to that number so your maneuvering goes up. So this whole thing is live and responsive in the same room where you're flying your ship and where you're taking damage and where you're patching and making changes. It's all within the same space. So that's why the game is so darn complicated. Because it's kind of like a video game really is I call it a system of systems. You've got a system that stacks on top of another, on top of another, on top of another. It's like these nesting dolls. And with this particular game, because it's kind of a simulation type thing, everything is very, very, very dependent on one another. It's like you can't have the game up and running until everything is working. So I can have parts of it working, but we've got all these dependencies. That's why I keep talking about cities all the time, since that's what's on my mind. I'm obsessed right now because I can't have markets functioning unless there's a city where you can walk into the building to trigger the market. But I could have a market just functioning in its own little market room over there by itself, but it's not really doing what it's supposed to until I get it put into the room where it's supposed to live. So yeah, everything is like one dependency on top of another. This is a very complicated game to put together by myself. Which brings me to the overall status of the game as a whole. Since we're at the end of the year, doing a little bit of a longer sum up here, so I hope you stick around to hear all of that this far into the video. You're still here, hi. I've got to get all these pieces up and running. So what happens in game development is that you wind up with a really, really, really fast ramp up because you go from nothing to something. So I've got a ship now, and I've got planets now, and I've got all these things, and they all start to take place. But then we start tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, adding small things. Like I spent time doing bug fixing just to make sure that the character was going up and down the ladder correctly, because I broke it after I tweaked the collision mask on him to make sure that it made developing the streets a little bit easier. I could put collision boxes where they're supposed to be so he can't run off the edge of the room. And I tweaked that, and it messed up his ability to go up and down ladders. And, it's like one thing on top of another. It's a domino effect. So everything has to work all together. And when you change one thing, after you've added 50 items, anything could get broken in that whole chain of events. So the more you add, the more complicated it becomes, the more likely it is for something to get broken, and the slower development gets. So you just kind of get used to it that you just know that development's going to slow down. So I was doing 2 videos a week because, first of all, I was kind of doing a little bit of catch up to say this is what I've done so far. But then I was just having such rapid progress, it was fine to do 2 videos a week. And now I said, okay, I can't do that. Sometimes it's a challenge to have even 1 video a week and have any content to share because things do slow down. It's like, what did you do? Well, I tweaked a little thing and it wasn't that exciting. I could tell you about it, but it's not that exciting. So I thought this would be a little bit more fun to show you a little bit under the hood. The next thing I'm going to be doing, and again, messing with graphics again, is I'm going to tweak some graphics to be a higher definition graphics, which is important to do because I'm getting to the point where if I'm making graphics and all this dependency is happening, I need to know what the scale of them are going to be. You can't have a player who's too big or too small. And if I'm building a city and I'm about to build 30 of them, I don't want to redo 30 cities. So taking the time and making sure that that first city is working exactly as it's supposed to is very important. But yeah, I wanted to have, this is what I did. I wanted to have it to where I could have this collision object right here. That's just a solid object is all it is. Just you bump into it. I didn't want to have it like up there to make the player bump into it correctly. I'm like, no, I just want to put it visually right where it goes so I can see it and not have to think too hard while I'm developing, which meant I needed to mess with the player's collision mask, which is a box. The player's collision mask is a box. And after I added, like 5 more pixels to the bottom of it just to make it balance where I wanted it to, that messed up his collision. And when he hit the ladder trigger, he would go off to the wrong space, hit the other ladder and go off because his collision mask is too big. So now he's like bumping this ladder and that one, and then he just ping-pongs back and forth and the whole thing breaks. So yeah, development does slow down because one little change like that has this cascading effect to the rest of the game because there's all these levels of dependency. But anyway, that is a little bit under the hood. I hope that was interesting for you. Please let me know in the comments below what kind of content you like to see. If seeing more technical stuff like that is interesting, or if you just want to see, hey, just update when something cool is happening, that's also fine. That's cool. I'll share whatever you'd like to know about. As far as releasing the game and what's going to happen with it, I'm planning to release it on itch.io and make it for free, actually. That's what I'm thinking. Donate if you can. I really would rather make things for the joy of making it, even though it's tedious and difficult and often lonely. That's why I do these videos, because it can be isolating and lonely and you feel like you're not doing anything and you just want to throw your hands up. So you have to be self-motivated. But being able to talk to you out there and have people who listen to the end of a long video like this, that's rewarding. You make it worthwhile. You really do. Thank you very much. Have a happy new year. I will see you all soon. Bye now.